President Donald Trump may be feeling better after dealing with his own case of coronavirus, but inside the Trump campaign, things are not going quite as well. According to Axios' Jonathan Swan, 3 senior Trump advisors who recently talked to campaign manager Bill Stepien had walked away from that conversation believing that he thinks that they will lose. This is Donald Trump's campaign manager giving people the impression that, yeah, I think we're screwed. I think we're going to lose the election. Now, that's despite, of course, Trump's shock from behind victory against Hillary Clinton in 2016. Now, here's the thing about that. That victory, I believe that's a fluke. I believe that was lightning in a bottle. It was the right conditions for an alleged outsider like Trump. Never in a million years could we have seen somebody like Donald Trump winning an election. But it happened, and now, of course, everybody's freaked out about it because here we had this super, super improbable thing happening, and now everybody's understandably worried that it's going to happen again. But that's the thing, right? So now Donald Trump lied his way into office, but he was able to do so because he went against a deeply unpopular establishment candidate who was very much disliked, and yet, at the same time, thanks to our system, was able to secure the popular vote against him and still lose. And so there was so many different factors that happened here. That said, since we don't live in a system where more votes mean that you win, and instead we live in a system where somebody in rural Kentucky ends up having a vote that is worth many more times more than the votes of people living in New York and California, we ended up getting this a-hole as president. Congratulations. But even Trump's own campaign manager now is worried that this is not going to be the case much longer, as polls show Donald Trump behind in a lot of places in these important battleground states. And let's be honest, right? The polls weren't really all that off back in 2016. There was a variance, and the problem is that Hillary Clinton did not have that much of a lead in the polls going into November. Now, you look at the difference between Biden and Trump, it's huge. Nationally, of course, you're going to have a gigantic lead, but even in a lot of these battleground states, you have way more than a 5 to 7 point lead with Biden over Trump. It's a pretty big margin, all right? So even a lot of people on the conservative side, people like Frank Luntz, are saying, I just don't see Donald Trump having the math to win re-election. And so now, as a result, chaos and finger-pointing all in the Trump campaign. Sources tell Swan that the Trump campaign is filled with internal blaming and pre-spinning of a potential loss, accelerating a dire move that is driven, that's driven by a daily barrage of bleak headlines over the past several weeks. Fascinating. And it's not as if those headlines are not well-deserved. Donald Trump's done a terrible job on dealing with coronavirus. That's number one on people's minds. Obviously, a very important factor is the economy as well. And look, we haven't had a relief bill in 6 months. A coronavirus relief bill can't get through the Senate. I mean, I don't blame that all on Trump, obviously, but you've got Mitch McConnell and the Republican Senate that are stonewalling basically everything. But I do have to point out that early on, Donald Trump did say, we're not going to negotiate with Nancy. We're going to end negotiation until after my election. And so what do? And then, of course, when the pills popped in, or I should say when they took effect after popping the pills, he's like, oh, my God, okay, let's negotiate. Yes, let's do a $1.8 trillion deal, which is kind of close to what Nancy Pelosi had originally agreed with, even though her original bill was at least $2.8 trillion. And, of course, the HEROES Act, I think, might have been a little bit more in the $3 trillion range, and much more comprehensive. Now, she rejected that, and you could make an argument whether or not She was right to be able to do that. But the whole point is that Mitch McConnell and the rest of the Republicans wouldn't let it go even if they all agreed. Which means Mitch McConnell and the Republicans appear to have been abandoning Donald Trump in favor of course, their donors, which really don't want to have any sort of taxpayer money go to relief, which is insane because when you think about Wall Street, and when you think about businesses, small businesses at least, well, they need people to have money. And of course, the PPP, that program, Paycheck Protection, is really important for small businesses. But these larger corporations are actually doing fantastically well. So they look at stimulus and go, not really interested. So there's that. And Mitch McConnell might be choosing that, unsurprisingly, over his loyalty to Donald Trump. Maybe because they see that Donald Trump his campaign is going down in flames. So we'll see. But again, he is in a world of hurt because a lot of people are looking at him and saying, why is there no stimulus? Why is coronavirus continuing to spread? Why is everything so disastrous? Well, it's because of you and your terrible mismanagement of basically everything. So now there's more. There's more because the campaign is not raising a lot of money. In fact, Biden's campaign is raising hundreds of millions of dollars more than Donald Trump's campaign. That said, it's not as if that didn't happen in 2016. To be fair, Clinton's campaign outspent Trump's by like 5-1. Some insane amount. So, okay. But that, again, that's not this election. I have the feeling this election is much different. Donald Trump is on the defensive during an economic recession under his watch and a pandemic. And a lot of his decisions, of course, are being questioned. For example, campaign sources tell Swan that they're baffled by the campaign's decision to continue, quote, half-assed ad spending in places like Wisconsin, even though the campaign believes that the state is no longer winnable. So Wisconsin, along with Michigan and Pennsylvania, those were the states that Donald Trump had won back in 2016 by small margins. Now they're looking at it. Michigan's out of reach. Pennsylvania, I think they're probably going to lose Pennsylvania by at least a few points. And Michigan, Wisconsin, all of them out of reach. Where's that path to 270 now? Out of reach. Out of reach. And so they're asking, well, why are we spending money in a state that we might lose? That we're probably going to lose. Now, defenders of campaign manager Bill Stepien, however, told Swan that he's still spending it. They're still spending that money because he knows that Trump would inevitably blow up if you were to read newspaper stories that he was going off the air in a Rust Belt battleground. So he just wants to be there. Remember, this is the same guy who's running ads in the Washington, D.C. media market. Now, in case you don't really know what that means or why that matters, Washington, D.C. is home to a lot of Democrats. It's a very big Democratic place. This is why they don't want to make Washington, D.C. a state or anything like that, D.C. statehood, because it would be controlled by Democrats, basically. And so why would you air something there? Oh, it's because Donald Trump happens to live there. And, of course, he wants to see himself on TV. And, of course, that was a fight with Brad Parscale, who was airing those. Parscale, of course, was replaced by Stepien, who stepped back on a lot of these, forgive the pun, on a lot of that ad spending. And so, anyway, now, many of Swan's sources do say that Trump, not Stepien, is primarily to blame for a lot of the campaign's fading fortunes. Quote, one advisor, a lot of this is the president himself. You can't heal a patient who doesn't want to take the diagnosis. I love how they couch it in medical terms, considering how, of course, Trump had coronavirus and yet refused 3 days after going to Walter Reed, he's back out there spreading coronavirus everywhere. I mean, come on. Come on. Now, the president, again, if this is right, apparently is not smart enough to understand that he is losing or why he's losing. Or his ego can't take it. I don't know. But, as always, fish rots from the head down. So you've got all these problems that are starting right at the top with the president's incompetence and inability to grasp the reality of the situation. Maybe I don't know. I think maybe he thinks that he's going to win this still, somehow. And that if he doesn't, of course, he can always step back because he's already laid the groundwork for this. I lost because of fraud. Fake, the election was rigged. I mean, we've seen that. He just can't fathom the idea that the American people now see him as deeply incompetent and as a terrible president. And that, of course, is and always has been his undoing. And at least, hopefully this time, it will have some sort of consequence for him. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.